开始了哈。你看我事情专利的也跳下汉文了，在这种。Okay, before we start, yeah, well, you mentioned about Tzu Chi. Actually, we have several Tzu Chi volunteer workers here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, Dr. Huang, yeah, he's a gynecologist, and Dr. Lin, dentist. Oh, he's outside, okay. So they work.
Oh, they know then, okay.
Yeah. So it's very, very nice, yeah. And also, when you were in Tzu Chi, actually the first president of Tzu Chi became university from medical school. That was my classmate.
Oh.
Li Ming Liang.
Yeah, I know him. I knew him. I've seen him a lot. Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah, and recently my wife read his biography. He came out with that book. And it's really talk about a lot of what you mentioned.
When I met him in Taiwan, I met him and his wife too. His wife is very...
Oh yeah, she's very, very, yeah. And yeah, we're going to see them in August. They're coming to New Jersey.
So New Jersey, okay,
so
give my best.
Yeah. So, okay, now we are open for questions.
Mount Xingyun of Fugwangshan takes side with the evil and corrupted, what I call corrupted political party going down, with who had killed 20,000 Taiwanese and controlled the island first with guns and later with a lot of money. The money is seized from. They seized the properties left by Japanese after World War II to win most elections. I'm sorry. He befriends with autocracy, with China, and distanced himself from all respected Dalai Lama. He is in favor of building nuclear power plants in Taiwan, whereas most majority of Taiwanese are against it. He once said there are no Taiwanese but Chinese in Taiwan, but 70% of people in Taiwan identify themselves as Taiwanese. He's anti-Taiwanese, anti-democracy. How can you say that he helped the development of democracy in Taiwan?
Okay, that's a good question. Look, I know he's a, they call it 政治和尚, political monk. I'm not trying to make him a saint or anything like that, okay? That's not the point. What I was trying to say was, I thought these movements in general, okay, and they're different kinds, appealing to different people, that the emphasis that they do have about people kind of reaching out to others in, basically peaceful way and so forth, and care and concern, etc., have been good for Taiwan when they're consolidating democracy, okay? I don't, say I advocate, Xingyun's personal politics, but the kind of the overall effect of that kind of religious transformation on Taiwan, I thought has been helpful. In terms of who I like, I like, I do like Tzu Chi, Master Chi.
I think it's a hindrance to the development of democracy.
As a person, maybe so. I'm open to think, okay. Yeah, in China, what the government will not allow is the development of extensive kind of lay organizations like Tzu Chi has, or for that matter, Fugwangshan and Fagwushan. So, like I said, Tzu Chi has 4 million basic lay volunteers. They have only 100 nuns in this center. They would never allow that in China, okay? Because they don't want lots of lay people to be organized and involved in this, even in doing peaceful things. So they have monasteries, and the monks, stay in the monastery. People come to the temple to...
Iced tea.
Go ahead. Thank you. People come to the temple, you know, to pray and so forth, and different occasions, but they don't encourage people to you know, study Buddhism themselves and to organize themselves into different kinds of groups. They wouldn't encourage the monks to do that either. Some people do quietly in their homes anyway, but they don't do that. So that's the big difference in Taiwan. These kind of large, kind of middle class oriented group of many lay people trying to, at some level, you know, put some of these principles into action in the world. So that's the main difference that I see. In terms of the doctrine, I think, you know, in Taiwan, it's more kind of modernized, if you want to put it that way, right? Like this, you know, engagement with modern medicine and so forth. Also in Taiwan, what they're very good at, these Buddhists, including Foguan Shan, but Tzu Chi is the media. You know, they have all these TV. Tzu Chi has his own TV station, and the others have cable TV channels and so forth, and they know how to do media, multimedia. You know, websites, which are very sophisticated, and it's really quite amazing. That's one difference with some of the Christians, like the Catholics. I think maybe because some of these priests, they're old now, they don't, you know, they don't understand how to do this stuff. You look at their websites and stuff, they're just not that good. But some of these books are really good. I mean, they really understand how to use this media. So it's interesting, anyway.
But is that the same principle?
Yeah.
I don't see the monks or nuns in China in the film, in any news or broadcasting that they wear the costume.
They wear the robes, yeah.
The robe, yeah, sorry. The robe.
No,
Sorry.
yeah. They wear the
In
robes.
China.
少林寺
So do they wear the?
Oh, they wear the robe, sure.
Sure.
功夫，功夫。
Yeah, sure.
There's a speculation that Beijing might consent to Vatican, you know, so Vatican can, you know, have a diplomatic relationship with Beijing and also with Taiwan, with Pope Francis. How do you think?
That's just speculation. I mean, honestly, I know nothing. I think, you know, in the Catholic Church, there's a split with this underground and this above ground. And the way in which the government has been treating them, it's gotten worse in the last 2 years. It really has, okay? The human rights thing is appalling. So, in 1999 or 2000, there was lots of talk, in fact, that they were going to normalize relations with the Vatican, with Beijing, the Vatican. And the price that the Beijing paid was that the Vatican would close down its, you know, embassy in Taiwan, right? So break diplomatic ties with Taiwan. And the Catholics in Taiwan were very upset about that. But as I understand it, the Vatican said they're willing to pay that price. They're willing to do that. However, then the problem was that they wanted China to give them more religious freedom in China. And the Chinese government wouldn't give it to them. Meanwhile, the underground church was kind of establishing, you know, facts on the ground, kind of getting hold of certain areas, and the government didn't like that. So the deal came apart. And so whether they can make a deal that would be acceptable as far as the religious freedom aspect is concerned in China is, I don't think the government is too rigid. I don't think they will allow it, right? So I don't think so, at least not in the near future, but who knows?
In your lecture, you forget to mention about bone marrow.
Yeah, oh. Yeah, but that's, yes, I did forget. One thing that Tzu Chi has is the largest bone marrow registry in Asia. And so they, provide, they get people to sign up. And then if someone needs a bone marrow transplant, they deliver it to them. So once again, it's getting people to kind of give to other people, including, money, but even including piece of themselves, just the bone marrow. And I was there actually, in I guess Hualien Hospital, and they'd just taken a sample from somebody, and they were going to fly it over to China, to Guangdong. They have to do it within 24 hours or so, so they had to do it very, very quickly. But willing to do that, and then, it's sort of painful. It's not pleasant to donate the marrow. So, this is part of their it's not just the instrumental aspect of it, but as they see it, this kind of spiritual cultivation. So the idea is that you will help people, even if they're strangers to you, and even if they're in some sense your enemy, etc., you will help them, and this will give you a bigger heart, and make you a fuller, human. So in many ways, I was, a missionary, and they actually got some of this stuff, the hospitals and stuff, like from the Catholics and the Protestants. And so the way I saw it was being a missionary, and it's like in the New Testament, there's a parable of the sowing of the seed. They throw some seed on rocks and some on good soil, and it grows up. So I thought we sowed some seeds, and for some of these groups, it fell on some good soil. And it produced fruit, not exactly what we would have thought, but it's good nonetheless. It was inspiration. I think some genuine good has come out of it, right? So anyway, that's my attitude toward it all.
You mentioned Marino in the beginning. Isn't that associated with liberation theology? That's my first question. And second question is, among those Christians in Taiwan, if they are sort of like left-leaning organization, was they persecuted by the government when you were there or not?
Well, it's like this. Many of the Marino priests, or not many, but some of them, that went to Latin America, that's why I wanted to go to Latin America, back in the 60s, were taken with this, theology of liberation, and were involved with leftist groups there, okay? Most of the ones that went to Taiwan, the older ones, were not, okay? And they felt that they had to, cooperate with, or not antagonize at least, the Kuomintang. And, their approach was not leftist, okay? That was the Taiwan scene. Now, then what happened when I got there in '68, okay, some of the people with me, so we were kind of, rebellious. And so we got interested in some of the movements, and especially with kind of Taiwan independence sort of stuff. So one characteristic of most of the Marino priests, unlike most of the other Catholics in Taiwan, was the Marino priests learned the local language. They learned Taiwanese, most of them. I didn't, because they wanted me to go to the mountains. But most of them, they spoke Taiwanese. They worked in these villages and so forth in Taichung area, and they they got a feel for grassroots life, and some of them got very committed, or at least sympathetic to Taiwan nationalism, which took different forms in the 1970s. Now, and then some of them got expelled, kicked out of the island. I gave that book, which you later on share. It has some stories of some of them, including I'm in that book too, by Linda Arrigo, okay, about some of those things going on in the 1970s. And then one thing that happened for the Maryknollers, because of that sympathy, which was different from what most of the Taiwanese, the Taiwan Catholic hierarchy had. I had already left Taiwan, but in the late 1970s, they cooperated with the Presbyterians, and they had these like prayer services for human rights and so forth. And they did this, for example, in 1978, perhaps. And they got this letter from the Chinese priests in Taiwan. Most of them were mainlanders. About a couple hundred signed this letter saying, you foreigners don't understand our society, our culture, and so forth and so on. You're sort of a disgrace. You should get out and not bother us anymore, and so forth. So it was that. It was a very painful time for some of them. So they got this letter, and I wrote a paper about this. Got published in Taiwan, and from the point of view of my friends in Taiwan, colleagues, they look really good, right? But back then it was really controversial. They didn't look very good. In the meantime, the attendance at the Catholic Church, was plummeting. There were very few people. And one thing that happened, the way I see it, was this: the Maryknollers is very good. They wanted to get down to the grassroots, and they wanted to go to places like Dajia, for instance, it came from, where they would be with the people and give them this faith. But in those communities, actually, the local temples and stuff was quite strong. People had a pretty strong sense of community. Dajia has Madzu, is a big thing. And so the priest didn't make many converts. And they thought, well, people are poor, and that, they'll listen to us. But maybe they were sort of poor, but they had a good sense of community and so forth, and so they weren't that receptive. So the Catholic Church, the main conversions they made in the 1950s were a lot of mainlanders. They came over from China, and they were, cut off from family and everything, and been through really, trauma and so forth. And so they were looking for community, maybe even connection with a powerful nation, the United States. And so they had a lot of converts among these mainlanders. The Maryknollers didn't work with the mainlanders that much. And then they also worked with the Aborigines. And of course, those Aborigines, most of them converted to Christianity, about half of them to Catholicism, half of them to kind of Protestantism. And so there's a lot of converts in the late 50s because of that. But by the 60s, that had sort of stopped. Taiwan society was stabilized and so forth. USA was kind of pulling back from, protecting Taiwan. So the Catholic Church didn't have the kind of, prestige that it once had, and the number of Catholics really declined, rapidly, something like that. The missionaries themselves say, well, the reason why, people didn't get converted or fell away from us was because they were poor, then they got rich, and so now they have, affluence, and then not interested in religion. But then I actually say it wasn't like that either, because actually the Catholics were somewhat richer than the rest of the population, because most of them were these mainlanders. And then second, you see in the case of these groups, Tzu Chi, also Fo Guang Shan and others, people are fairly affluent, and so they get affluent, and they still feel a need for some sort of, spiritual life. And they don't become just, secular. So if the church, the Catholic Church for that matter, the Protestants had adapted better, they might have had something, to offer. But then they got too compromised by, association with the Kuomintang back in the day, et cetera. And I think that was a problem for them.
Christianity was introduced to Taiwan more than 100 years ago, but it is not successful. The Christian population is about from 3 to 5%,
Right.
including Protestant and the Catholic. I want to ask is why there is a renaissance of Buddhism, Taoism in Taiwan. Why not Christianity? Do you have any suggestion how Christianity can grow?
Can grow.
Yeah.
Well, I think one reason why not the Renaissance was because it was too, privileged by the Kuomintang back in the 50s and 60s. So in a way, they're paying the price for that, right? Back then, it looked like a great thing, but then now it wasn't. So there was that. I'm not so sure. I need to think about this more. In Korea, for example, about a third of the population is Christian now. And in Taiwan, not so. And there are these kind of competing forms of spiritual religious life, and they're attractive, they're alternatives. And I kind of think that, Christianity will be in Taiwan, and for that matter in China, a vital presence, in the society. But that the growth is not going to be more than, maybe 7 to 10%, right? So it could grow some in Taiwan because I think these other competing doctrines will kind of, crowd it out. So I think that's going to happen in China too. So there's this talk it's going to become this Christian nation. I sort of, my own speculation is that it will sort of reach a plateau and stop at about 7-8%. But we'll see.
What intellectual in Taiwan tend to believe what kind of religion?
Well, different kind of movements. I think a lot of these intellectuals are very interested in this Buddhism, like especially Faguishan, like I said, they have a lot of outreach toward, intellectuals. I know a lot who are very keen on that. There's some Christians, and as I said, the Presbyterian Church is still very strong, and it carries that kind of its tradition of being really rooted, So that's pretty strong. I'm not sure it's growing much, but it's retained its strength.
Pentecostal churches in Taiwan are more growing. than Presbyterian.
In mainland China, the same thing.
Are you personally persuaded by Buddhism, since you have studied so much about Buddhism? So that's, that there are scholars who becomes Buddhist Christian. I think you are a Catholic. Do you think
I'm
you
still
can
a Catholic.
Yeah,
I'm still a Catholic.
Buddhist
Maybe.
Catholic. Is that possible?
I think so. I actually, I feel, I don't like to draw these boundaries. I'm still a Catholic. I learned a lot from these Buddhists, and I think, they are doing a lot of very good things. And part of it they've learned from Christianity, and it should be vice versa, right? And so that's, look, I thought in Tzu-Chi, really, they do some very touching things, helping the poor, sick, people in need, and Jesus said, you did this to the least of, my brethren, feed the poor, the sick, you did it for me, right? That's what he said, and that's what they're doing. So I figure, you can't go too wrong with this, right? And so they're doing good things, right? And then we can make a theology that kind of figures this out, right?
Why there are more nuns than monks in Taiwan? In Thailand, there are more monks than
Yeah,
nuns.
it's kind of, for one thing, in Thailand, it's been sort of like an obligation for young men to do like a couple of years of monastic service, right? And you didn't have women, becoming, that wasn't even allowed, but that's more recent. In Taiwan, why more women? One simple answer, or not simple, simplistic answer, too simple, is that it's a little bit like maybe in the United States for like Catholic nuns in the 1930s or so, where women didn't have that many opportunities to, have kind of major roles in society. You got married and took care of your family, that was it. But then if you became a nun, you could become like president of a college or doctor or stuff like that, You could really, fulfill yourself in a wider social role. And now in the USA, there's less of that, so women still restrictions, right? But women can have opportunities to do all these things too. And so therefore, to do it via, joining one of these religious orders is not quite as attractive or meaningful. Whereas in Taiwan, there's still enough restrictions maybe that, it's more attractive for women to, follow that path. That's too simple, but some of that I think is at work there.
I think another simple answer is that women more spiritual than men.
Well, there's that too. That's also cross-cultural. Cross-cultural, that's true. I mean, I think that's another aspect of it.
I think I want to add that in Thailand, which is Theravada tradition, they don't allow to ordain women. That's what. If
Right.
they are allowed to do that, I'm sure they will have a lot of men.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I think in Taiwan, a lot of people heard about Dr. McKay,
yeah,
especially Presbyterian, but
Yeah.
not a lot know about Marino. I have a friend, his father Humphrey. He has been spending in Taiwan for 69 years. He's already 87, and he's coming back next June, this coming June. And few people, know about it. I mean, we have 3 sisters live in Monrovia. They spent 40 years in Taiwan, dedicating and working for the people there.
Yeah.
But I think Marino ought to have more publicity. But, okay, that's my comment. My question is, I know Marino has a division of justice and peace. Does that division have to, doing anything for the developing countries? And for example, will it help to release Mr. Chen Shui-bian from the prison?
Well, the Marinola, the priests themselves are, have a full spectrum of, political and other kind of commitments. And in Marino, look, it's like a lot of these religious orders. It's diminished so that the people left or died. So the average age is about 70 now, and so they don't get many young people, and so it's gradually kind of fading. So the energy, isn't there anymore. They have done a lot of wonderful things. I know they're very dear to me. I have lots of good friends, and I hope their story gets told more fully. In Taiwan, they made a really good contribution, especially because of their connection with the grassroots. So And they didn't, unlike Dr. McKay, they didn't do hospitals and stuff or found universities. The Jesuits did more of that. In Hong Kong, they did, some of the Maryknoll Sisters. In Taiwan, in Zhanghua, they had a clinic, a small hospital, sister doctor. I think at least one of them is here now in Monrovia from that clinic. So they had that, but not as much. Okay, so that's why they're not remembered quite as much. I think, I think. But some of them, one of my friends, Mike Fonte, he left same time I did, and he ended up working. He still does for the DPP, in Washington. He's like their spokesperson, lobbyist. I see him when I go there, and I get his emails about latest statement from the DPP and so forth. So that's one way for me. I keep up with all of it. So Fonte, some of the Maryknoll Sisters, they also got very involved with the Meili Dao movement. A few of them, Sister Nadine Tierney in Kaohsiung, they were very engaged with that and got kicked out basically of Taiwan. So and made a good contribution, huh?
Yeah, I'm interested in knowing what kind of language used in the Huaguangshan, Fuguangshan, and Tzu Chi. And you mentioned that the Presbyterian Church is doing okay now, but from my own observation, I think Presbyterian Church is facing a big crisis. That is, people attending the church tend to be very old. Although from the statistics that the congregation is growing, but that is because they are adding a second services, try to allure to attract younger generation. But I suspect that although the Mandarin speaking and the Taiwanese speaking, I think although they are worshiping under the same roof, but their ideology or their thinking, is probably not quite the same. And I think, as we know, that Taiwan has been under this so-called linguistic genocide, for more than 5 decades, under Kuomintang. So I think this language, issue will have played a big role, in the development of, different, religious.
I agree. In Taiwan, for instance, those Buddhists, Foguanshan, in their public events, public speeches, they usually use Mandarin. Although they will also do things in Taiwanese as sort of like a translation. So I attended this big ceremony in Foguanshan, where you kind of guiyi, you take refuge in the Buddha. There was 1,000 people the day I was there, and then there's a ceremony, and then after it, there was like a sermon, given by the head abbot of Foguanshan. Actually, Xing Yun is officially retired. He's still in the background, in charge of everything, I think. But Ding Xin, I think, was the one then. And he spoke some in Taiwanese and some in Mandarin. The group was mixed, right? These people had taken those vows. And in Tzu Chi, Master Zheng Yan, she's Taiwanese, and I think more recently can speak pretty good Mandarin, right? I mean, but she's had to kind of learn it. And she seems to enjoy speaking in Taiwanese, when she can, right? But when she's giving like a big public talk to a mixed, kind of audience, she would usually do it in Mandarin, as far as I can tell. But if it's, she thinks that most of the people there in the group are Taiwanese, she likes to speak Taiwanese, she's more, very, animated when she does it.
Professor Madsen, my friend said that my question is stupid, but I'm going to ask you anyway. No question is a stupid question.
No.
I know you don't, I know no one has a crystal eyeball, but my question too. Number one, I'd like to ask you your comment about Taiyang Huaxue and sunflower movements recently.
Oh, where
Number
does it go?
two, no one has crystal ball, as I say, but you've been in Taiwan so many years, you know China, Taiwan so well. What's your comment and what's your prediction and what you say about future political status in Taiwan that will be developed?
Oh, boy, I don't know. I don't know. I think the sunflower movement, one good thing about it is it's going to energize this younger generation. And that's good. I mean, they've become engaged in the political process, And I think that's healthy. It's good to have a new generation, deeply active. What will, in the long run, come of it? I don't know. There'll be new elections before too long. Ma Ying-jeou is not going to be in office forever. China, mainland, what's going to happen with them is they have more power now, and they're using it, and that because of that, it doesn't look super positive for the independence of Taiwan over the long run, right? But they can't use the power fully and so forth, and so it's hard to know what will happen. Also in mainland in China, they're going to have their own political evolution. I personally think the Communist Party is too rigid. It can't control a society like it is, and is facing all these problems, ecological and other kind of problems. So I don't predict that it's going to keep rising and dominating everything. I think it's going to have its own problems. That gives them space, for Taiwan for a while. So I answered. I guess I don't know. I don't know what to say. So I can't predict the future, right? I think this younger generation, though, is very good that they and they want a say in their society. Their government is very inspiring. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking you. I left Taiwan in 1967. Many of us have left Taiwan, so you are closer to Taiwan more than I do at least.
Well,
thank you.
Can we get back to the Christian population in Taiwan? And I heard some people said one of the problem with early missionaries, they ignore the traditional culture of Taiwan. So they try to convert people into Christianity and forget even tell them to knock up all their ancestors'
tablets and stuff.
Yeah. So that didn't go well. So that could be one of this. But on the other hand, a couple of years ago, one of our friends wrote an article. He went to the south part of Taiwan, Tainan. He saw a Catholic church. They said Tian Fu, that's a Christian, and Tian Gong, that's a Buddhist. It's actually the same. And try to embrace more of a culture. I don't know whether that have any positive effect on bringing some Catholic people back, or.
What I think about that is, I'm overall in favor of this kind of adaptation, like Ricci was, like Lima Do was. But I think the main challenge is to kind of be able to adapt to and have something important to say to a kind of modern life, okay? So I found that about some of these Buddhist groups impressive, that they were speaking not just to Chinese traditional values, right? There was some of that there, but trying to modernize it and to deal with the situation, lifestyle, and the problems of people, modern urban society. And the traditional life, look, you have a big family, lots of sons especially, all successful, right, all that, right? Well, that, you can't, it doesn't work that way anymore, right? And people are very stressed, but they want some meaning and some connection and so forth, and they want to have those old values in a new way. So, for example, in Tzu, they have this, these books of kind of testimonials. They have these stories. The story is like, I came from this and I, ended up education, to work and study. I don't know how to do it. Lifestyle is so different. You try something, you can do it, right? Have an expansive kind of view, family, all that, right? So this is speaking to sort of traditional values, but then recognizing the fact that you can't just live like that anymore, right? Adapt to a modern situation. And that's creative. I think that adaptation to speak to the situation.
Does not allow artificial birth control. This will scare people. Do you think so?
That's probably a factor. Probably a factor. Again, for me too, look, maybe to keep the family together, and so, it makes me more flexible, seems to me, right? And it's not to give up on the values, but to kind of realize that, the ultimate meaning of it is still retained, but they have to kind of fit a modern situation, right?
Yeah. So do you think
I do personally, but the Pope isn't going to listen to me. So I personally do,
and peace should be allowed to marry?
That's what happened. and I'm willing to associate with non-Christians like these people, and since I get Master Zhengyan, and she has some wisdom. Look, like in one of these dialogues she has, people write and they say, like this one woman writes in, she says, she's very upset because furious, hates this wisdom. And says, well, she doesn't approve of this kind of behavior. She's no question. She's not saying it's a good thing. She does this, but she says, you should learn to kind of, understand, this situation. Your husband loves this person. You should care for this person too. And so anyway, so there's a certain amount of stance that but situation, deal with it in a positive way. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but I sort of like that spirit.
But from Buddhist point of view, there is a reincarnation. In that sense, if she is good, she cannot because this was predestined. That she will not have a good husband. So what Jesus
that's part of modernity too, to try to make a different understanding of it. So for instance, Zhengyan, so I built some of these houses for earthquake victims. But also, Master Zhengyan, I went to some of his Dharma talks. And part of them was the issue of whether this earthquake was part of bad, karma, and what this meant, and illusion. And he said, no, that's not the way to look at it. Also, this issue of illusion, there's a word for illusion. It's not, it's just buildings falling down. But the issue is what it means. So you see this as just a disaster or a chance to meaning to it. And the meaning is that better than there's agency there. Same with things like divorce and stuff. Obviously, things like that are the result of actions or mistakes, or even this one, of course, the marriage, right? Things happen. But it's not just, you can make the meaning. It basically meant having a big family with lots of children, success, and all that. But then you can't have that anymore. The term itself, everyone puts the character to fool up. No one knows what it means, realistically. And we interviewed these people, the religious leaders in Hong Kong last summer. We interviewed the Cardinal of Tong. referred to his friends, Cardinal Shen, from Taiwan, Kaohsiung, who got, terminal cancer, died. And it's a very unhappy situation. But he said Cardinal Shen then went around Taiwan giving sermons and so forth about his situation. And said there's more people listening than ever before. And he found this extremely meaningful. In a certain sense, it was a happy situation, meaning-wise, subjectively, even though a very unhappy objective situation. And at the same time, you have people come into church or whatever who have good jobs and well-dressed, and, successful and depressed, and stressed, and so forth. So you could have a good material situation and yet be very depressed or lonely, that's very common. So the main thing, what meaning you put on it, right? And religion gives some sense of this meaning, or at least it can and should, if it resonates with your real life circumstances. Answer to anything. I do see some real creativity there, and I just appreciate that. Also, and then people in the global south who are attracted to fiction. I also think people have left.
Some consider not your position.
I'm a Vatican II Catholic, you see, and then their group is now diminishing, right? But yes, the hope was that the church would engage the modern world. You know, the greatest document was the church in the modern world, and that they would listen to the signs of the times and be engaged with the world, you know. And people had different interpretations of what that meant. And so I had the interpretation that you really take it seriously and you engage with the modern world's philosophies and its, you know, its art and its literature, as well as its hopes, aspirations, etc. Others thought that, well, no, you kind of have a certain kind of window dressing, you know. You kind of adapt to certain kind of external shell of modernity, but to keep the sort of core values, because the core values I'm okay with, but the core doctrines that can't change. I think Pope John Paul II was more of that style. He was in his philosophy and everything. So, you know, I think they should keep on developing and open to that. So that's what I wish they'd do more. Okay.
I just want to tell another news. Good news. 在5月17号有一个慈善音乐会，就是要答谢许多美国年轻去的到台湾，他们在台湾的40年、35年就回来这里，他们甚至没有 social security， 所以这一次慈善音乐团，在5月17号才做，5月18号是在 Laguna
Laguna Woods.
Woods、Irvine。
哦，不错。
台湾基督长老教会也是有不同的 group， 他们也是要 present 这个 music。
会不会来
fundraising？
会不会来 San Diego？
可能应该是，这主办的是北加州的陆家会。
陆家会，哦，不错，不错，太好，不错。
Two questions. One is that you mentioned in Korea there's more Christian population activity. Is there a reason for that, or is that a help from the government? Somehow help or any effect by government? The second question is that aware of the folk religion in Taiwan is actually different from Buddhism. In the history of the past years, actually 6 years, I'm 6-year-old, that I see the Christianity was growing in 50s and 60s, but the folk religion is actually declining in 50s, 60s, 70s, and then Buddhism replaced Christianity. But recently, my observation is that the folk religion start to bounce back. Do you agree with that?
I guess I don't know enough about whether it's bouncing back or not in mainland. It's not the at least some of them, Presbyterians, I guess, but others, were major forces in resistance to the Japanese during the early part of the century, Japanese colonialism. They fought for the nation. And so they earned kind of a place of in the Korean national consciousness, where the Christians in Taiwan, with the exception of Presbyterians, didn't do that. Then after the Korean War, what also would have happened would be a lot of Koreans who were Christians would have left the North. They would have gotten out. They ended up, in the Cold War going to the South. So they had more of a concentration there, too, which was kind of a critical mass, maybe. And so all those things kind of make Christianity a deeper rooted, factor in Korean society, I think. Then the churches too, even including the Catholics, some of them played major roles in, fighting against, dictatorships and so forth in Korea, and they earned respect of people for doing that.
I heard, because my nephew is a priest in Korean church. He said that because Korean, after World War II, they abandoned Buddhism because they don't like China, and China was weak. And the European and America are strong, so they turned to Christian.
That may have helped some. In Taiwan, that helped. I think that's one reason they turned to Christianity in the 50s to some degree. But, it didn't, that effect was temporary, pretty much. And also you saw in Taiwan that Christianity dropped off once the USA stopped supporting Taiwan. Actually, I did this paper, so you see the graph. Basically around the time of the second Taiwan Straits crisis, Kimai Madsen, and the U.S. said, at first they said, we might even use nuclear weapons to, help, take back the mainland, defend Taiwan. And then by 1958, they're saying, no, we're not going to do that, it's just containment. And then as the 1960s go on, it becomes clearer and clearer that the USA was kind of cooling its relationship with Taiwan. And then, of course, by 1970, then they expelled from the UN. And then Kissinger goes to China. So people were abandoned, even before the normalization of U.S.-China relations. And so, coincident with that, the enthusiasm for Christianity in Taiwan was declining, right? It's a correlation. I don't know causality and correlation, are two different things, right? But there is a correlation there, right? So,
I think one of the reasons it's not been growing fast is, parishioners put everything to priests. Priests do this, priests do that. Let's ask the sinful. Let's ask the, everything. Okay, but Protestant church, especially charismatic in nature, like Pentecostal, or in our Taiwanese community here, Taifu, the pastor, working as a manager, they put everyone, every member of the church, as a missionary, as a soldier, he just worked behind, motivate everyone, go evangelize everyone. So that's the secret of success.
I agree with that too. I think in the Taiwan, at least for Catholic Church, I kind of wrote this paper. I included that one problem was paternalism. The priest really was in charge of everything. It all came from the top down and never engaged the local people. You even see this like in the mainland, but also you saw it in Taiwan. see these beautiful churches, right? Basically funded with money from, America, Europe, all built from the top down. See these temples in these Taiwan villages and towns, right? Those temples labor over many generations for the people, right? It came from the ground up, right? And it cost a lot of money and everything to do that, but over a long period of time. And so, and they're kind of rooted in the spirit of these communities. Whereas some of the modern churches were kind of parachuted down from above. It doesn't have the same depth, when that happens. At least that's what I think. And that's partly why I think some of these Buddhist groups flourish, because at least there was a feeling that they're coming from below, not brought in from the outside. At least that's my opinion.
My question is related to the first question. From. I saw in the email criticizing the sunflower student movement. Also, Zheng Yan法师they are against the civil movement. On the line, basically, is law and order. So, on that theme, they sided with the government. Now, my question is about human rights and democracy among the Buddhist faith. Seems to me they are ignorant of human rights and democracy. And you mentioned in your lecture about the function of the Buddhist organization, kind of helping Taiwan towards modernization because they make peace among the different racial groups in Taiwan. That's very new to me. I didn't know that. But my question is the concept or the idea of human rights and democracy are lacking in Buddhism. While we have seen human rights and democracy are always advocated by the Taiwan Presbyterian Christians. So my question is how can we make the Buddhists in Taiwan to be aware, to understand that human rights and democracy, that we want those. And if the Buddhists are majority in Taiwan, in this case, how can Taiwan go into democracy with the majority are ignorant?
Well, I think, look, Xing Yun is Xing Yun. I'm not saying he's he's always been close to the Kuomintang, and he has all his connections now with mainland China. He's trying to, get support to rebuild this monastery there and all that, okay? So that's the way he works. And so I'm not saying that's a, big model of democracy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that kind of the spirit of these groups had kind of unanticipated, but a consequence kind of helping provide kind of a spirit that and balance was useful to consolidate democracy in Taiwan. Okay. Zheng Yan, I didn't know what she said about the sunflower movement. I didn't hear that. I know, I believe, I'm not surprised Xing Yun, was against it. I think that one thing these groups have done, okay, is mobilize a lot of lay people and encourage them to take a lot of initiative. Okay. Now the structure of a Buddhist organization, it's very authoritarian, right? the Da Fa Shi, you know, is a shangren, a master, right? You know, and that's the way it is. So it's not a democracy in that sense. But they encouraged and energized and inspired these large lay organizations, which, in Chi's case especially, but to some degree I think also Foguan Shan, Fagu Shan, people take a lot of initiative, you know, and they don't know what to do. They learn to kind of work together and to cooperate together, decide projects to do together and things like that. And that capacity to take initiative, you know, grassroots, I think is key to democracy, right? And that can then transfer itself to political action. Which is why I think, say, in mainland China, they don't like these groups. So even if a group is acting harmoniously, it's not causing any trouble to the government, the very fact that it's large and it enables people to kind of work together, this potentially is threatening, because someday, if there's a political issue, people are used to working together and thinking for themselves to some degree, it can have a different function, right? So I think that this capacity to enable people to cooperate and decide to do things, etc., I think has a good effect. Overall, the data on census, for example, in Tzu-Chi, the survey data, is when it comes to political affiliation and political preference, I think the last election, the basic breakdown was about the same as that of the population as a whole. So whatever, you know, numbers that the Kuomintang had in the election, that percentage was about the same percentage in say, in Tzu-Chi. So the breakdown was pretty much reflected, you know, country as a whole. It wasn't skewed one way or another. So that part sort of reflects the society, you know, as a whole. So they aren't partisan organizations. I think Xingyun would like to use his connections to be partisan. But I don't think even he can mobilize his whole group. He has his own, he's at the top, and he has friends, he makes his connections, et cetera, but he can't command the group as a whole to kind of take a particular stance. And overall, I think they want, like you say, social order. They're afraid of just total anarchy and stuff like that, so they don't want that. But in terms of goals of, some form of wanting transparency in government and so forth, I suppose that they'd be in principle in favor of that kind of thing.
How about
Both Faguishan and Tzu-Chi have a recent involvement in partisan politics. Say, Xingyun Foguanshan is different, but no involvement in politics. That's one. In Tzu-Chi, they've added the 5 precepts in Buddhism, 5 basic precepts: no killing, no lying, no stealing, no sex outside of marriage, no drinking alcoholic beverages. The 5, they added 5 more onto it, and one of the 5 is no participation in politics, which they mean partisan politics. They mean concern for the public life, but not partisan politics. Then there's some others too. No chewing betel nut is one. And then the hardest one, probably impossible to follow actually, but the most difficult one to follow is no disobeying of traffic regulations. No speeding. So I don't know. That's difficult, but that is a precept, right?
Yeah, let's try to rephrase the question. Is Christian teaching more conducive to social activism?
Activism.
Yeah.
Okay, activism. I think the Christians are more, the philosophy is more conducive to social activism. In Buddhism, it's interesting. There's a distinction between what in English you could call engaged Buddhism and humanistic Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism is what you see in certain kinds of Theravada Buddhism in Thailand, Cambodia, but also in Sri Lanka, places like that, where the Buddhists are very active in fighting for various kinds of structural change in society, better for worse. And this humanistic Buddhism, perhaps because of the conditions under which it was developed, is not interested in that. So from a point of view of my Catholic social action, tradition, I'd criticize that. They're not interested in changing unjust social structures per se. They're interested in reaching out and helping people in need, et cetera, right? So they're not interested in this kind of social structural change. Okay? And that probably is because of their origins in Taiwan, and maybe they'll develop in a different direction in the future. I don't know. Okay? But so in that sense, it's conservative, or it's not revolutionary, right? Unlike some Buddhist movements in, like I said, Sri Lanka and other places like that. So that's a difference. In a certain sense, it's a conservative social for democracy dharma. I thought it was conducive to democracy because democracy does need a certain kind of conservative social energy that's not fundamentally hostile to democracy. In other words, when a country makes a transition, to democracy, when the dictatorship falls apart, it can fall apart. You have tremendous centrifugal force, right? People pushing in all these directions. And you need a certain kind of centripetal force, too, to hold it together so it doesn't just degenerate, right? But the centripetal force needs to be generally favorable. I mean, not hostile to the notion of democracy, but kind of say, well, let's not go quite so fast, but also care about each other and kind of, work out agreements with some more harmony, et cetera. And I think, those voices are important in a society. And really, you've seen in these new transition to democracy countries, many of them have failed, right? Because they've degenerated into chaos, and then dictatorship comes in. A good example, Egypt, I guess, is the latest example, right? But you see this again and again. So the balance is very hard to achieve. You have to give Taiwan credit for achieving this balance, even though it's kind of precarious, right? But they've done it. A lot of countries have failed, and a lot of people have said, Asian societies they're not democratic, right? I think too that's basically wrong. I think Taiwan proves it's wrong, but you hear people say that, don't they?
Okay, I think it's time. Okay, thank you again.